You're listening to Heroes in the Moment. What's up, heroes? I'm Michael.
And I'm Nathan.
And today we're breaking down the last 3 episodes of X-Men 97.
Let's get it, baby.
But before we do that, we have a super cool announcement.
Yeah, so guys, we have a new feature on our episodes where you can send us a message, just a little text message, by following the link at the bottom of our episodes.
Yep.
You can either submit your questions for Heroes Q&A there, or just shoot the breeze with us.
Yep. Anything you want to say to us, it'll send you right to the messages, and you just send us a little text message.
Yeah, if you just want to say good morning or good night, my love, we'll take that as well.
We will. And if good morning. And if I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. All right.
How was your breakfast?
All right. So let's get into this podcast for today, breaking down the finale, because it's all Tolerance of Extinction, parts 1 through 3 of X-Men 97.
8, 9, and 10.
Must I just say, wow.
Yeah, man. They hit it out the ballpark.
Dude, they hit it
with
and
these
beyond.
3 parts, man.
And beyond,
Listen, man. I've enjoyed the show, but it hasn't been my favorite so far. But man, they really capped it off like so strongly.
Dude, they did.
Like
I can honestly say this is one of this was the best Marvel show. I mean, it's just so good. I mean, from start to finish, it maintained, and you don't often see that. I mean, you see shows that have certain seasons that are good, or you have shows that certain episodes, hit certain places, and then other episodes that are not as good. But this show pretty much across the bar hit. Yeah.
It's consistent. It's a shame that we don't see more of that.
I know.
But man, like you said, I mean, there's just one clear, concise idea. They follow it. They insert their cameos well. They have great character development.
The cameos are not forced.
Yeah, the cameos are not forced. The storylines are cohesive and easy to follow.
Exactly.
And like I said earlier, I love what they do with the characters, and obviously the action is top notch.
Each character gets a spotlight for having so many characters.
Like a good 20.
Yeah, 30, they're balancing so many characters, but they each get a spotlight.
Yeah,
and they're all executed very properly. And it's just such a good story, and I'm excited. I'm super excited for season 2 as it's set up really perfectly as well. Had a great finale and then a perfect setup. That's always what you want to see. And this is, I must say, it's a really good season of television. I mean, it's up there.
It's up there, man.
As one of the best shows I've seen for animation that I've seen ever, and it's just such a good show. And I love how a lot of the people are coming to this show of X-Men 97. A lot of people are like, wow, I didn't know X-Men had this game. And everybody's come in and seen like, wow, this is really good. And I'm actually not afraid to say that this surpassed the original series. And that's really hard to do because you wouldn't expect that.
Yeah.
You wouldn't expect it that a show that is continuation, a new show of an old show would do better. But it is. And this season of X-Men 97 was better than everything the original show had. So that's really incredible.
Come on, Michael.
To be able to do. On it. So I'm super excited. So let's get into it. We'll go into each episode and discuss them individually, starting with episode 8, Tolerance of Extinction, part 1. So let's get into this episode. So this episode was also fantastic. I mean, you had the backstory of Bastion, which was really cool to explore what happened with him and how he could have potentially been one of the original X-Men. But
his mom kept him from
that. But in his mind, he thought that his mom wanted him to go to Charles, but in the X-Men, but he didn't want them. So like it's this kind of, it's just a really good writing there to see like how his perspective was the X-Men didn't want him, but the X-Men's perspective was we did, and we could have made you different. And that's just a cool way of concept of how they did it with his character and showing how he grew up being different. He grew up he was a technopath, right? So he had these abilities, but he didn't know how he was different and why, and all of that storyline. And I must say, Bastion was a really cool villain.
He was so cool.
He was a really good Theo James, man. Awesome
Theo
job.
James. And like I told you before, I had no idea really who Bastion was before this show, but man, he was one of the best parts.
He
like
was.
I said, that backstory, really it was sad, man.
It was.
I thought they did it really well. And seeing his old childhood home was quite sad.
Yes.
But yeah, man, shout out Theo James.
It was really cool. And then it cuts to him in the future and back again with Magneto in chains showing the Holocaust tattoo in full force. And just, I have to say though, the way, honestly, I'm not afraid to say this. The way that they did Magneto's character this season may be one of the best character arcs and developments that I've seen in a long time.
It felt so pure and right for him, you know?
Like Magneto's arc this season was just so good, dude. Like seeing him going and wanting to be a part of the X-Men, wanting to lead the X-Men out of respect for Charles and his last wish and his will, and wanting to be that leader and be good and do that, and trying to do good, even though humans kept with everything they had.
Yeah.
And then Genosha happened, and then Bastion happened, and then eventually we'll talk about here in a few minutes. He was like, "Screw you all."
Yeah, and then he comes back.
And it was epic.
Yeah.
And I must say, one of the best character
I think he
developments
might
I've
have been
seen.
my favorite, and I thought they did a killer
I
job,
agree.
man, with his character.
I agree.
Like I said, I just feel like, I mean, obviously, you know, the show is really accurate, but I feel like, you know, he was just spitting an image of him from the comics.
He was. He absolutely was. I mean, this show in itself was. I mean, it not only you could tell that the creators of the show read and loved the comics, and that's one thing that I feel like the Phase 4 of the MCU was failing at is because they were hiring people that didn't know the comics. They were hiring people.
Yeah, they had no respect or love for the characters.
The people that they hired
you know?
to do Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, apparently they didn't even watch WandaVision. They just watched the last episode. And like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
You know, so you got to have people who love it, which makes me a little bit sad and unfortunate that they fired the creator.
Like the showrunner essentially for the whole season.
They did. And I mean, thankfully he already did season 2. So that one's already done.
Really?
He did season
Already?
1 and 2
Okay.
already. And season 2 is actually supposed to come sooner than we thought.
No
which
way.
is like, bring it on.
Yeah. Alright.
But I'm really sad about that. So I hope like either they bring him back. I don't know why they fired him or the reasons, but I hope they either bring him back if it wasn't like anything bad, or they find someone who has the same capability as him.
Yeah.
Because he knocked it out of the ballpark.
I know. There might be some stuff under the table, you know, that they
Right.
just don't want to get out.
Right.
Also, we hope it's not that, but just seeing how good the show is, man, and how they stay true to the comics and how they've done such a good job with these characters, you know, and how they're killing it now with Marvel animation, man. It just really wants. I really want to see more and more, not spin-off shows, but you know, the great world, and like we're gonna say in a little bit, like they do such a good job with the cameos.
Yes.
I've seen these guys, you know, like Cap and Iron Man and Hulk, Black Panther, Daredevil, you know, in their own worlds, and that makes me just want, like, you know, either an Avengers show or, you know, just a show with
honestly,
one of them, or but
you know,
they're just showing that everything is so interconnected.
Right.
I want more of that,
And I
you
do
know?
too. And honestly, like the way this show has gone, it has the potential to go to the movies and be an animated movie in the theaters based off this series.
Yeah.
And I think it would do well. And I think if they played their cards right, if they did it right and doing this whole idea of the multiverse, if they finish and cap off the MCU story and just go to Marvel Animation as its next in the future, and that's their phase with the multiverse,
That
is
is absolutely crazy idea. But I see what you're saying. But like, just the fact that this is coming after all of the, you know, the valleys that they've been in, and then this huge, you know, big bright light at the end of the tunnel. Why not run with it?
Right.
You know?
But there's also that factor where they could run with it and make huge mistakes.
I know.
Because they're
more
going to look at
expensive to make
they're going to look
animation.
at the success of X-Men 97, but they're going to look at it for all the wrong reasons.
I know.
They're going to think, oh, they're loving this because, oh, it was a continuation of an old show. Let's do this with Spider-Man. Let's do this with Fantastic Four. Let's do this with the old Iron Man show.
Yeah.
And let's bring those. And then they'll bring those series in and make shows of them. And then they won't be as good and they'll be watered down. They'll be trying to go to quality or quantity. But the reason the show's been successful, and the reason is because the writing's good, the story's good, animation's good, and it had everything rolled into one for it. That's the reason it's good. Not because it's nostalgia. There's no reason at all that the show's good because of nostalgia.
stands really well on its own.
Exactly.
You know, and like you said, Michael, like, you know, obviously if you're an executive for Marvel, you know, for Disney, you're looking at the success, you know, you're looking at it's making you money. And obviously you recognize how expensive it is, you know, but you see, you know, how well it's done. And obviously their first thoughts are going to be, like you said, more and more money, the more shows we pump out like this. But that's the problem, because the more and more you make, the writing starts to get thinner. You can't keep that same team that wrote that first, you know, season together. And then you just start hiring writers from all over,
From
like
left
you said,
field.
who don't have that same respect. And like you said, you know, that's how really anything starts. You know, like the start of the Marvel Universe, for example, you know, had a pretty solid start. But as it goes along and they get more greedy with their money.
Exactly.
You know,
Exactly.
The projects start to, you know, suffer.
This
from
is
that.
why instead of, I mean, they're always going to look at the numbers. They're always going to look for the financial aspect because it's a business. I mean, it's Hollywood's a business. It's what it is. But hire fans that are writers, because
that's the lesson they got to take away.
they got to take. That's the lesson.
Biggest lesson.
That's the lesson, because you hired Bo, whatever his name is, and he is a fan of the X-Men. Evident. evident and through a fan of the X-Men from the comics, from everything. I mean, you see so many 90s, 80s, 2000s comics go mesh into a really good and cohesive story that makes perfect sense and is so good in every form of the word. Run with that. You know, bring in fans for even your live action movies. You want to do Fantastic Four movie? Bring in a Fantastic Four fan. Even if they may not have directing capabilities, bring them in as a writer, as a idea
the bounce
person,
ideas
and
off of.
then have your creative writing room develop it based off those ideas.
Yeah.
There's so many different ways. You would make more money in the long run by doing that than you would by just shifting them out.
Yeah.
Because eventually you're going to come to a point where people are going to quit watching.
Yeah.
And
we've already seen that happen.
You got close.
You know? Yeah.
And now with X-Men 97, and I have a good feeling about Deadpool and Wolverine, you're going to get some people back.
You're getting people back.
Don't ruin it. You know?
And I honestly feel like one of those people, you know, this show has really kind of cemented them back into my better graces, especially after the horrendous run that they were on.
Absolutely.
But like you said, if there's one lesson, just take away that the people like when it's true to the comics, you know?
People like stories that, I mean, another thing the show had going for them is they didn't make this show for kids. They made this show for the fans of the original.
And that really helped.
That also helped a ton.
Like you see in Star Wars, you know, there's been a good number of, you know, more kid-friendly projects.
Exactly.
And, you know, the discourse online with Star Wars fans is not good. Usually with most of those projects,
got
they
to
don't
follow
feel
your
for
fan
the
base.
fans. Yeah.
You have to follow your fan base. They're no longer kids anymore.
Yeah.
They're now adults.
We're 20, 30, 40
exactly.
years old.
You're in your 20s and 30s, 40s. Give it to them.
Yeah.
And that's what they deserve. But anyway, to get back into episode 8, we see the story of the human sentinels come alive. The human sentinels that are coming in, they're really hard to destruct. We get this awesome scene. We get two awesome scenes going back and forth. One being the destruction of the X Mansion, which is very common in the comics. That mansion gets destroyed so many times. So many times. And then we get an awesome scene. I'm sure you love this scene of Wolverine and Nightcrawler. Yeah. I mean, their action battle scene was cool. You have Wolverine with fire and then Nightcrawler with all three of his swords. You get to see the animation of them going through Nightcrawler's teleportation, which was epic. Yeah. And just everything about it, like that whole scene was amazing.
And I love the chemistry within that scene too.
Oh, yeah.
I thought they pulled it off really well.
It was so good. Such good action. Wolverine and Nightcrawler just bodying them. It was great. It was so good. And then you get the whole other side of the story with the Summers family vacation, which you had, you know, Scott and Jean and Cable going over that.
Cable, man.
Cable's awesome.
He was so cool in these 3 episodes.
Also one of the highlights of the show.
He is definitely.
He was so good. I'm like, why didn't he get a story? Like, why didn't he get a title card? Man. You know?
I know.
I wish he would have got a title card, but he was great in this show. And I love how like close they got him to Josh Brolin's voice.
I know.
Do you notice that?
Yeah.
It's so close.
Especially as they went along.
Yep. But that was such a cool scene as well, seeing them fight against some Sentinels, and they had their car and they were driving, and the whole battle sequence with them, that was really, really cool. And then we get to one of the coolest parts of the episode, the Magneto was right speech. That was so cool with Vanessa, right? I think she was giving that speech and she was talking to Bastion and Sinister, and then she just ends it with, there's one thing, you know, we're missing, and that's Magneto was right. Yeah. And that gave me instant chills. Like as soon as I heard the words Magneto is right, and then you just see him land in literally the North Pole and set off a worldwide EMP.
Yeah, so he touched like the whole like magnetic field right at the force.
Entire magnetic field of the Earth, dude, and set off a worldwide EMP.
You see the waves going around. I was like, what?
Dude, I'm like Omega level mutant right there.
I can't remember, you know, in live action or in animation if I've ever seen something
that crazy, that scale
to affect the whole world,
the entire world. He turned the entire world off and electricity
because he did that to shut down the Prime Sentinels.
Shut down the Sentinels, yeah. And
that was I really liked how all these sleeper agents people are coming alive into these Sentinels, and then she lets him go.
It was so good, and then you just hear him say enough, and he got his moment in that scene and set off the EMP.
That was so cool.
And then in that moment, you get all these cameos. You get Spider-Man swinging in the '90s like, Spider-Man.
What? Yeah,
and it was so cool.
Yeah,
and it was so perfect. Fire. You like see, he's in this world too. Yeah. You see Silver Samurai, and then you see Omega Red, which is also a super cool cameo there. And then you see them going, Magneto just declared war on the humans. Yeah. And then Professor X lands back and goes to me, my X-Men, saying the line, and then the show ends. And it's just like, oh my gosh, you know, like I've never seen Marvel, like honestly, in live action or animation, do something to that capacity. Yeah. Or the show in itself, like this. The way that it was accomplished, the writing, the beautifulness, Magneto was right, and then having him land, set off this worldwide EMP, and then just all this stuff, and Professor X coming back, and Storm coming back, and all these people, and it just coming to this one compulsive story. it's like it's finally you're feeding
Yeah,
us. Finally,
it made you feel like the next episode was the finale.
Exactly.
Really. I felt like it ended on such a huge high note. I'm like, where's it going to go from here? I got two more
on
left.
such a high note. Like, and that was the thing is I've never felt like this passionate about a show since maybe Loki when it was coming out weekly, because this show, as soon as it ended, I wanted more. And then I was waking up on mornings again to watch it early.
Yeah.
And I hadn't done that before in a long time. And it was really refreshing to be able to want to do that and have a desire for that again.
I know.
Which was really awesome.
This is the quality we've been wanting a long time.
Long time.
It's always such a cool moment, you know, when a meeting like that just reminds, you know, why they are who they are.
Yep.
So seeing that first huge exhibition of power, that was cool.
That was really cool. All right. So then we go over to Episode 9, Tolerance of Extinction, Part 2. And personally, I think this was my favorite episode of the 3. I think this just was so good. So it starts, we get Professor X is back. Of course, there's some discourse between Cyclops and him, which goes on and shows it later what happens with that. Because obviously Cyclops is like, why did you abandon us? Natural thoughts. And Professor X was like, whatever, we didn't know and what was going on here. And then they make this plan. They're like, we got to come up with with plans to stop Bastion on one end, and on the other end to talk to Magneto to get him to revive the world, because it'll be bad, especially with the humans and
it's because like what was gonna happen to the Earth? It was gonna be like destroyed if it destroyed the Earth's magnetic field or something, right?
So because destroying that and having no electricity, that could be just detrimental to society because of how much it's reliant on it now. So that he's like, we got to get him to turn it back on. And so they had them split up in two teams, and you get the X-Men Blue and X-Men Gold, which are a big comic run. X-Men Blue and Gold. So we got that.
They get their
really
classic little suits.
Some reference. And then they do get in their classic suits, which was super awesome.
Seeing Jean Grey in that suit, dude, I was thrown for a loop. Because I forgot what she had looked like. It's been so long.
I know.
What is she wearing?
Yep, that's her classic original Miss Marvel suit when she's Miss Marvel. So that's really cool. Or Marvel Girl, not Miss Marvel, Marvel Girl. But yeah, super cool to see them in that suits. And then you get Magneto coming back and imploring the X-Men for help. He's like, you guys, he literally goes to me, my X-Men, and talking to them. And he's like with Charles. And to me, I get this whole Martin Luther King versus Malcolm X comparison is what I see. And I think that's a big thing of what they're going for here. You have one end, Charles, which is the Martin Luther King, wanting peace, wanting there's a better way to do this. And then Magneto's like, no, he's the Malcolm X. He's like, we gotta go to violence now. There's the only choice we have. So that was really cool.
People are bad. That's what he's saying.
To get that comparison. And that does bring you to this choice. Which side would you have chose?
Well, I don't trust humanity. I'm not saying go around killing people. Obviously, I disagree with Magneto's methods, but I don't think he's wrong in not trusting humanity's nature.
Right. I think, you've seen what Magneto's gone through.
He's suffered more.
He's suffered more than anyone. He went through the Holocaust. He saw his parents killed right in front of him. He saw what humans did. And then when they found out he was a mutant, he saw even further what they did. And then continuously, he's wanting to be a liberator. It's all he's wanted to do is help mutants in their lives. And he's always loved the X-Men. Like when Storm lost her powers, he was very like, oh my goodness, Storm, like he loves them. But it's that hand where he's so burned by humanity.
I know. And he sees the worst for humanity. And in the future, he only sees the worst for humanity while only looking out for his people.
Exactly.
Right? Whereas Xavier sees a more peaceful world. Whether or not that's attainable, I guess it's not up to us. But I always think it's really interesting. And you see a lot of movies, especially nowadays, adapt that. Like in the Planet of the Apes movies with Koba and Caesar. It's kind of the same relationship there.
Yeah. And then we get, as Magneto's imploring the X-Men for help, Rogue and Sunspot join him, which makes sense for their characters. I think out of the ones that makes the most sense. Obviously Rogue, she was burned multiple times with that happened to Gambit and the whole effect of that.
We've already seen her go off, early in the show. We know she's carrying a lot of anger.
Exactly. And then Sunspot, of course, after what happened with his family, he's wanting to go with Magneto as well.
That hurt.
Which was also super interesting. Which I'm surprised actually some more characters didn't necessarily go, but I think it made more sense of those characters than anyone else. But some others, I think, were thinking a little bit like, maybe he is a little bit right.
But so he was just creating like a new haven, right? Essentially for the mutants.
Essentially, going back like he did in the original series with his own, meter in the earth.
So that's called Asteroid
M. Asteroid
okay.
M.
M for mutant, I assume. Okay.
Yes.
Awesome.
So that was really cool. All right, so then we get them to preparing for the final battle. They got their X-Men suits on, and then they go into their two fronts, X-Men Blue versus Gold. You have one team with Cyclops and Wolverine going after Magneto, and then you have the other side with Storm and Jean going after Bastion, and Beast is also with them.
Yeah.
So you go over to the Bastion side of things, and we see Morph turn into the Hulk, which was epic.
Dude, man, when he turned into the Hulk, I freaked out. I'm like, he looks so good.
He
looks so good.
So good, man. Morph is cool, man. He's
cool,
a legend.
Man. I like Morph. I didn't even know who Morph was either before this show.
Yeah, Morph is cool.
Morph is my boy.
Morph is cool. So he goes in, and we get Sinister versus Jean battle, which was cool.
Yeah, with the whole bowling lane thing.
Yes,
with all
the
the bowling animation
powers, and it was really
that was
good
a really
animation.
cool scene.
It was a really cool scene, really cool fight,
a cool setting.
And then we get Cable getting taken over by Sinister. And then it's revealed that Cable does in fact have his mom's powers, and we see that was really cool to see that, and he using his telekinesis and all those powers at her. And then we thought Jean got there for a second.
We thought she
because she projected and brought Cyclops in so he could see and be like, oh no, and then we think she's dead, and then he goes back and it's like, whoa. But that was crazy. And then we go back to something even crazier over on Asteroid M. Crazy. Crazy. I freaked out.
Yeah.
I probably, my mouth was wide open for 10 minutes after this episode ended. Anyway, let's get into that. So Charles' idea, he wants to try to take over Magneto's powers so he can reverse what he had done.
Yeah.
So Wolverine gets his helmet off and he's doing it.
Mind.
But Scott's like, no, we got to give them more time, and shoots the professor off, which brings us to potential for Cyclops' story in the future. I mean, in the comics, Cyclops was always this Boy Scout, this leader. He's always this follower of the professor. But then Professor comes back, and he's starting to be like, okay, maybe Magneto's right. And eventually he does kind of go on his own and do some things more so on Magneto's side and becomes that new leader and almost a villain. So I wonder if we're going to get that story developed. Maybe not next season, but maybe season 3 or in the future with that. And then we get Magneto going back after Charles, but Wolverine pulls up and just stabs Magneto right there. My mouth went open there as the blood was coming out of Magneto's.
You see the claws coming through and the blood dripping down.
Blood dripping out of his mouth.
I was like, wow.
Wolverine just throws one of the best lines I've heard in a long time. The brave die first.
The brave die first.
And
because
then,
I've been in a lot of wars, something like that.
And I know the brave die first. And then Magneto's like, no. And then he literally pushes Wolverine back with Charles just going, no, Magnus, no. And he literally pulls the adamantium out of Wolverine's
body.
Skull. And
out of his body.
And it showed it. It showed it. And then it cut. And
it showed his claws retracting.
Yes. And it showed it coming out of his veins, and then it showed it popping off. And then the episode just ends. And then you have me just like this for literally 10 minutes.
Yeah, man.
That's what it was for 10 minutes. What was your reaction?
Listen, man, to be honest, I've always thought about this scenario too. You know, they're always going at each other. They have this rivalry. I'm like, dude, why doesn't he just pull that metal out of his body?
Yeah.
But to see it actually realized was crazy, man. I rewatched it a couple times. I'm like, did that really just happen?
Dude.
Also, you gotta think what's gonna happen now? Is that? I mean, there's no way the metal goes back in his body.
No, not for a while,
right? Because it wasn't supposed to be there. It was an experiment put in there.
Experiment to put in
his bones come out naturally, but to have that turn into the adamantium.
So in the comics, when Magneto pulls out Wolverine's adamantium, he does survive it. Wolverine doesn't, as we see in episode 3.
Are his bones still intact?
Yes, his bones are still intact. But he's obviously clearly damaged from the adamantium being pulled out.
He's doing him a favor.
Yeah,
make sure he's walked through the metal.
In the comics, it's actually revealed that the adamantium was actually holding back the rest of Wolverine's mutation. And so when he pulls out the adamantium, it turns him into, once he heals, into feral Wolverine.
What?
And he's a whole new story. He becomes more beast-like.
You're saying he heals better with no adamantium?
He heals better with no adamantium.
Obviously, he maybe not be as powerful with his undestructible body.
But he becomes more like a more feral version of himself. So I think we might get that developed in season 2. But we'll see.
So you think we're gonna see his bone claws then?
I think we will. Plus, we'll get the whole feral look probably in some capacity.
Dude.
So I'm excited for that.
That would be cool.
It'd be cool.
Yeah.
And then it cuts, and then let's get into the finale, episode 10, part 3. So this episode starts off with Charles and Eric's backstory. We see them at the old bar. They're talking. They're getting to know each other. We see their past, and we realize this is just in their minds at this point, seeing what happened in their past, how they became friends, and how they both realized when they were mutants.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people are thinking that this is where Onslaught is going to come in eventually. A lot of people are thinking Onslaught from the comics, a villain from the comics. So Onslaught in the comics, whenever after Magneto pulls out Wolverine's adamantium skeleton, Charles and Magneto have a mind battle like we see in the show. Okay. And in this mind battle, there's this like dormant personality almost that gets embedded in Charles's mind from Magneto. And in this, Charles becomes Onslaught. And his mind gets taken over by Onslaught, and he becomes this like horrible villain that resembles both Magneto and Charles, like a mixture of magnetic and the mental powers of Charles and Magneto.
How does Magneto put a whole person in him?
I don't know exactly. Well, not a person. It's like a dormant personality or something of that nature. And Onslaught comes out. So I think that they're not going to do that quite this season 2, but it's seeming like maybe they're leading up to it for a season 3 villain is what Onslaught's going to be.
So that's just the effects of Charles being in his mind.
Yeah. But Charles is the one who becomes Onslaught. So it's interesting to see that. Magneto doesn't. He's actually going to be helping the X-Men again with it.
So he infected him when he came in.
In a way. So it's cool to see that. We got the animation with Charles and Magneto's mind battle was something else, I must say. Yeah, like they were just screaming at each other with the lights going out there.
It gave me like huge like anime vibes. like honestly.
Yeah, I know.
If it was in Japanese,
there was a lot of anime inspired stuff in this episode, in this show. All right, and then we go and we get a bunch of cameos out of the blue. It was so good, though. We got Iron Man, Captain America over with the United Nations.
Yeah, man, that part was fire.
So cool. We get Daredevil. I'm sure you probably were like super hyped.
I was like, he looked so good, man.
He was so good. We got Doctor Strange, which is super cool. We end up getting Cloak and Dagger. Mm-hmm. We got a Mega Red again with Crimson Dynamo and the rest of the Russian people. We got Psylocke. We got Black Panther and the Dora Milaje.
He looked cool.
A lot of cool stuff. Going on there. That was really cool.
They did that so well. And like I said earlier, man, I want more of that.
Dude, yeah.
You know?
More of that world. Just do it right.
I know.
And then Cable's dragged to the ground and Bastion makes Sinister Cable tell him how many times he went back to try to save his mother, Madeline Pryor. And he reveals 200 times. Wow. And it's also seemingly revealed that the Genosha event was a canon event, like really? Across Spider-Verse. So that had to happen, and it cannot be changed. That's why it kept being pulled back.
Gotcha.
So Gambit is dead. Man, it's so sad. But we'll talk about that here in a minute.
Okay, all right.
But such a cool thing there. But we see the Phoenix rise again
out of the water,
the ashes out of the water, and just destroy Bastion, all this stuff, destroy the Sentinels, and then destroys Mr. Sinister, pulling out all of his DNA, all
of his DNA,
who he was,
shred away everything. Now he's an old grumpy man with wrinkles,
which was fun. I was laughing at that when Morph turned into his face. He's like, "Here you go." I don't see much difference. It was so funny. So good.
That felt really good. That was satisfying, really man.
But Bastion still after Jean let out the Phoenix, Bastion was like, no, and he became Future Incarnate is what they called him. He got on like the Archangel wings. He took Cable's arm.
Took Cable's arm. Yeah, his left arm.
Molded it into his new suit.
Yeah, really got wings. He was giving me like Archangel vibes from that.
Yep. And so that he flew up to go to Asteroid M, and the rest of the X-Men come soon later. And then we get this cool thing where we get a cool sequence of Cyclops fighting against Bastion with his laser eyes, which is also cool animation. We get Jubilee, a cool scene, shooting her fireworks.
Yeah. They all kind of get their like one-on-one
They all get a moment. You know? Nightcrawler got a moment. I was afraid for Nightcrawler for a minute.
I know. He's one of the most, like durable ones.
Right. I was afraid for him because I thought when they caught him, he was dead, but thankfully they didn't.
Snap his neck.
And then we get probably the coolest fight that the show has given us in that Rogue versus Bastion, which was so
she started going
cool.
off. I was like,
going
holy
in.
crap, how good
like
is
she comes in and then she just delivers the amazing, his name was Gambit, remember it, and then just punches him, man. Yeah.
Through a freaking wall. That was crazy.
So good. So that was epic, and we got that fight. And I was also nervous for Rogue there for a minute. I was like, no way they're going to kill Rogue off and Gambit in the same season. There's no way. But they didn't. And Sunspot came in, had his moment, and fight against Bastion as well. And then we get this whole scene in this moment of Asteroid M is like the humans have shot the Magneto protocols at Asteroid M with the whole thing because they're worried about what's going to happen.
So the Magneto protocol, what's that again?
So that's like if Magneto ever was to do something against humanity to try to destroy the world or destroy humans, that was the protocol against Magneto.
Okay.
To try to get him. So it means that these were like nuclear warheads that had no metal and no nothing.
That had to be designed by Iron Man or something.
Probably, but still crazy.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we get into this moment and they realize, okay, we got to save this stuff. And they have this moment with Bastion as they're like, listen, you're not the enemy. You know, there's a way for this.
Yeah.
But he got exploded. Bastion dead.
You see Cyclops, like you were mentioning earlier, you know, his human side, right? And he's trying to err on the side of good, you know, but the whole time, you know, Beast in the has taken over that Sentinel and just crushing him.
Yep.
But nope, he decided to.
Yep. So Bastion got exploded. Then you have X-Men going, we got to come up with a plan to save the world. So Scott and Jean use their mind to talk to Cable, and they're telling him how much they actually genuinely do love him.
He's just like sitting in a diner or something.
Yeah, and then they're coming to the realization that all the X-Men are going to sacrifice their lives for this because it's the only way to save the Earth. Which, you know, we've been saying...
How would Asteroid M destroy the Earth?
I mean, that big of an asteroid coming down...
Like, how big is the asteroid, though, is what I'm asking.
How big is Asteroid M? I don't know.
Like,
probably
would it actually destroy the Earth?
Yeah. Like they say this, and if an asteroid the size of like a volleyball touched the Earth, it would destroy like majority of the Earth.
Are you kidding me?
They say like in science because of the speed of light or whatever. I mean, obviously the atmosphere would destroy it, but something that big, Earth done. If it hits. So
dang, we gotta stay out of the way.
Yeah, I know. We gotta move, man.
Book it.
We gotta go to Mars. Real quick.
In reverse.
Let's go to Pandora.
Yeah, man.
Let's hop over there. All right,
we would not survive.
No, Scott and Jean. So they get that moment with Cable and shows Cable Scott's eyes, which was cool. Holding it back, and then the X-Men go into this protocol to work together to stop utter destruction, to stop this destruction of this. And then Jubilee and Sunspot made it back to Earth because of their fight. And so Forge and all these people were down there looking up, watching what's happening. And then you just see whoosh, and the X-Men are time displaced. So you're thinking to yourself, like, well, at first I was like, what happened? Like, in my mind, I was like, okay, multiverse stuff. Are they going to go to live action? That was my initial thought. I was like, what's going to happen there with that story? But then Forge is in the X mansion and Bishop comes in and tells him, oh, they're not dead. They're just displaced in time, and telling him like, this is what we need to do to get back, which is really cool. A callback to the original show when Forge and Bishop will work together in the future. And now they're working together again. And you see the faces of the different X-Men and stuff, which a lot of them were presumed dead. And you had Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver on there as well, which they said off world, which was
really
thinking to me.
So how did that disappear? So Professor X finally gets through to Magneto.
Yeah.
Right at that point, and then Magneto comes back alive, right? You know.
Yes.
I don't understood how he survived the claws.
Yeah, he came back to life, and
like they don't explain that. He just has a couple bandages on him.
Yeah.
But Wolverine stabbed him like all the way through his chest.
Well, that was the whole thing was what their mind was going through. But with the whole thing with his mind, I just assumed that he was like in a moment of distress. He had to wake up and get busy. Plus, they had him stable anyway. It was just the whole thing with their minds going back and forth with each other. Magneto losing himself, Professor losing himself, and all this stuff in their mind battle that was going on through this episode.
So what did Magneto do to stop the asteroid?
So he came in and like he was, I don't know, I can't remember exactly what happened. I can't remember
either.
I can't remember.
I'm pretty sure he came out and then he stopped
because he was the only one to be able to stop it.
That's obviously why the headspace battle was so important. Yeah, and they're in some cool spaces.
Yeah. So I think, well, he came out before the whole Bastion thing and started to destroy the comet itself, I think, or the asteroid, to try to get it to where it wouldn't hit with Earth, and defeat Bastion was the original goal because he was the only one to do it with the metal. But I can't remember exactly. I'll have to rewatch that scene to see exactly what happened. But anyway, they become time displaced. For some reason, they get taken out of time, which will be the plot synopsis for season 2. And we see that Rogue, Nightcrawler, Magneto, Professor X, and Beast are landed in ancient Egypt.
Like 3000
BC, so ancient Egypt. And in that, they find a young Apocalypse. They find a younger Apocalypse, which is known as the first mutant. And then you have on the other side, Jean and Scott, who are in the future with Mother Ascani. and we see young Nathan.
Yeah, teenage,
a little
teenage
young,
Cable.
probably 12, but Cable, young Nathan Summers, Cable. And Mother Scotty is actually also Gene and Scott's daughter. Rachel Summers is also their kid.
So are
as
they
well.
siblings, Cable and
Rachel? Yes.
Okay.
Well, technically not, because Rachel is the product of Gene and Scott, whereas Nathan's the product of Scott and Madeline. So they're technically half siblings.
That's so confusing.
I know, it is confusing, but they're two different. Okay, Madeline and Gene are completely different, but they're clones.
But so Scott didn't know that.
Not at the time.
Her was Madeline.
Not at the time.
But Madeline thought she was
not time.
Gene.
So what seems to be happening is they are merging the plot lines of X-Men and the Apocalypse, and then they're merging also the whole Ascani and Gene, all that plot into one, which is going to be a cool concept for season 2. But we do not know where the whereabouts are of Wolverine, Morph, and Storm. So we don't know if they are in the future with Gene and Scott, if they're also in ancient Egypt, or if they were displaced somewhere else entirely. I don't know.
Man, I think it's kind of funny that if they were displaced somewhere else, like that they weren't shown,
Yeah.
Maybe they're hoping, there'll be a lot of discourse about it in the downtime. But I thought it was a little weird that you had all these superheroes, all these X-Men in Egypt, and then you just had the family affair over there. So I don't know what's gonna happen.
Yeah, it's two different things, and they're all colliding into one story. And then the episode ends whenever that was revealed. And then we do get an end credit scene, which shows present day Genosha with modern day Apocalypse coming into the rubble and picking up and holding Gambit's card and saying, "So much death." And then that episode ends.
So what's that teasing?
So that teases big things. Okay. So him picking up Gambit's card and coming up and saying "so much death" is reference to the 4 horsemen of the Apocalypse, and that he will revive Gambit as one of his 4 horsemen, and Gambit will become Death.
What?
Will become Death is one of his
You're
horsemen.
kidding.
No.
Really?
So that's going to be really cool to see.
Yeah.
So it won't be necessarily Gambit. It'll be Death.
Yeah.
But they're
in Gambit's body?
In Gambit's body, yeah.
Will he have any of Gambit's
I assume he'll have Gambit's part. Probably not personality, but powers.
Okay.
I would say. And we'll probably get some cool comic renditions of that and what his look will be like. So we'll see that. And I wonder who the other three.
That's nice.
Other 3 horsemen will be. We'll see later.
Yeah.
So it seems like they're putting this whole Ascani and the Summers plotline with the Apocalypse and mixing it together, and that's what going to be season 2.
Yeah.
But as a whole, man, I just gotta say this show.
Yeah.
Exceeded all expectations and some.
I was not expecting it.
Not expecting it at all. It was so good. So good.
We got to talk about what we ranked this bad boy.
All right. So like out of what?
10.
Oh,
obviously.
I know that, but I didn't know if you were going to rank it with other episodes. What were or not episodes? Other Marvel shows.
I'd say, man, as much as I love WandaVision, you know how much I love WandaVision. I just think that this is the best piece.
This is
of media that they've made, in the television format.
It is. It absolutely is. And honestly, it's probably top 5 project. I mean, it really is.
In MCU?
Oh, I would say it's up there for sure. So I
hadn't thought that far yet.
I would think that. I mean, obviously, it's still got a little bit of recency bias. We'll have to see how it sells, but I will say it's objectively the best show that they've done.
Too.
And honestly, outside of the MCU, probably best Marvel show anyway. It's just so well done and so good in a lot of aspects. So now, rating out of 10.
I think I'm gonna go ahead and go first.
Okay.
I'm gonna try to keep. It's hard, to rank shows versus movies. Anime versus live action.
Right.
I want to give it the love it deserves without being disrespectful to other great things I've seen too.
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna go 8.5 for this one.
Okay.
I thought about a 9, but I think I gave Dune 2 a 9.
Okay.
And like I said, obviously, they're completely different.
It's hard. It's hard to compare. Yeah.
But I think 8.5 is
okay.
Pretty good, and that's one of the highest scores I've given. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, that's great. I'm gonna give it a 9 out of 10.
All right.
I think honestly it could be higher. Only reason I'm doing that is I would rank it higher. I feel like it deserves higher, but I think just because to play an effect for the future recency bias. That way in the future I can look back and be like, okay, 9 solid, or I can change it later and be like, okay, it's more 9.5.
They always say it's better to go a slight bit,
lower, but I think 9 is absolutely definitive. Just because when you look at the episodes as a whole and you rate them all, I mean, I think all of them are probably an 8 or above anyway, except for maybe one outside of
they
one.
All hold up really well.
But they all hold up well and I think they're all really consistent. So it's got to be that 9 or even higher. That's what I'm gonna give it out of 10.
No, man, I'm with you on that one. I see where you're coming from. All right, guys, thank you all so much for listening to this episode. And always, if you liked it, please let us know by giving us a 5-star review and a download. Like I said earlier, we have a new feature on our episodes where you can send us a message by following a link at the bottom of our episodes. You can either submit your questions for Heroes Q&A or just shoot us a regular text message. Also, if you guys want exclusive access to episodes, including additional movie reviews outside of our general purview and early access to all of our episodes, feel free to subscribe to our membership, Heroes HQ. And then lastly, if you want to stay up to date with new episodes and announcements, check out our Instagram at Heroes in the Moment.
And we just want to thank you all for listening. And as always, we love you 3000.